As the small party rode out of Deepwood Motte, no one spoke. Jon stared straight ahead, not looking at his half-sister or the Onion Knight, Lord Davos. He could feel Sansa seething underneath her ladylike composure. He was frustrated too. Only he was not surprised by House Glover's refusal. Jon had spent a lifetime getting told he was not a Stark. He was used to being denied a claim to the name that raised him. For Sansa, the Stark name had been taken from her, and the North was not keen to let her take it back. We are nothing to them, a bastard and a woman. House Stark is dead, rang in his ears. Jon thought, House Stark is standing right in front of you. Winterfell is hers by right. To have the chance to fight for this woman, to do what is right by her, they cannot see her strength, but they will. Jon had decided not to take the more common route away from the keep, fearing the Glovers would betray them to Ramsay Bolton. He even instructed his men to shoot down any ravens flying from the castle while they were still on Glover land. Ghost had run off into the woods to hunt. Jon knew he would not stray far from them. It was a small party, including Jon, Sansa, Lord Davos, 2 of Stannis' remaining men that had somehow escaped Ramsay Bolton to join them, along with 2 Mormont men and a wildling named Sten. Jon had dared not take more men. A small, fast group would be harder to find if, in fact, Ramsay Bolton thought to look for them in this part of the region. The path from Deepwood Motte narrowed due to the heavy snow, allowing for only 1 rider abreast. Jon saw that Sansa, in her frustration, did not attempt to slow her horse, forcing the others to fall in line behind her. They went on like this for near an hour before the path widened again, and he could finally pull up next to her. Sansa, I'm sorry for what the Glovers said, was all he could think to say to her. Do you think they are right? She asked him. You are Ned Stark's true-born daughter, he answered. Yes, was her only reply. But is House Stark dead? Not yet, he said. You are still here. Sometimes I feel dead on the inside, was her only response. Jon gave her a sideways look. He reflected on his sister's silence, all she had endured in King's Landing and the Vale. She was just a girl when she watched them take her father's head. Which is worse, to die on the outside or on the inside, he thought. In his own death, he had felt nothing on the outside. When he came back, there was a numbness inside him. Sometimes I think I'm dead on the inside, too. He noticed that the rest of the party had fallen back a bit. Jon thought it would be a good time to stop to make water and call for Ghost. Telling Sansa to wait, he walked slightly off the path. On his way back towards her, he grabbed a handful of snow, forming it into a ball. She was standing next to her horse, taking the brake to be off her saddle. He called her name just as Lord Davos and the others were catching up to them. Sansa, he yelled playfully. What? She said as she turned her head towards him, just in time to have a snowball hit her square between the shoulders. Seeing the look of horrified surprise on her face made Jon start to laugh. That's the Sansa I remember. Jon Snow, she said as she started to come toward him. Seeing her reach down to pick up a handful of snow herself, Jon decided to make a run for it. Oh, no, you don't, Jon Snow, she said as she started to run after him. I'm a lady. That made him laugh even more as he ran along the path. She was faster than he expected, and it wasn't long before Snowball almost hit him. Not a bad arm for someone who insists they're a lady. You missed, he called out. He heard her huffing and puffing, giving up the chase. You will have to come and get your horse, you know, he heard her call down the path to him. I can walk, he yelled back. The cold air in his lungs from running felt good. He called for Ghost, who soon joined him as he walked on the path surrounded by snow and stately pines. The hoot of an owl caught his attention. He saw Sansa's snowy owl from the day before staring at him, then flying off into the sky. Before long, he heard the horses getting closer. Glancing back, he saw Sansa sweetly leading his stallion alongside her as she rode her gray mare, Lord Davos and the others following just behind her. Jon, come back and ride, she tried to persuade him. It's lonely without you. Sighing and giving her a smile, he mounted his horse. Turning to her, Sansa, he started to say. Barely a moment later, a dozen snowballs pelted him from all sides. Ugh! He yelled, what are you doing? Defending the lady, my lord. Lord Davos said with a laugh. At that, Jon Snow kicked his horse into a gallop, leaving Sansa, Davos, and his men behind. A few yards up the path, Jon dismounted and quickly began making a mountain of snowballs. As the party approached, he expertly pelted each man, leaving the hardest and iciest for Lord Davos. With that, the entire party was off their horses, tossing snowballs at one another. Even Sansa was able to get a few hits on Jon, Lord Davos, and one of the Mormont men. Finally, exhausted, Jon changed his tone. "All right, enough of that," he said. "We had best get as far from Deepwood Motte as we can today." Everyone was quickly back on their horses. Jon almost began to worry. "I shouldn't be joking with my men. Even a small party like this, I have to be their commander." Then he looked around and saw Sansa's face flushed pink from the fight. Her mood seemed to have lightened a bit, her body energized. The men, too, seemed to sit a little taller on their horses. Well, a few snowballs are a good way to remember you're alive, he thought, again glancing at the pink cheeks of his half-sister. Jon rode next to Sansa, with Davos and a Mormont man leading the way. "We'll find other men," he told her. "Yes, we must," she said. As the rest of the afternoon wore on, they kept up a good pace. The gray sky began to darken just as they had come upon an area where the trees parted. Overhead, Jon spotted a snowy owl. "Look," he said to Sansa, pointing towards the sky. "Wonder if that's your friend from the other day." Watching her glance up slightly, "It is," was the only response she gave him. Jon wondered how she could be so sure. As he continued to look at her, he noticed how tired Sansa appeared. Never saying a word or asking to rest, she pressed on at the same pace the men were going. He suddenly felt guilty for not stopping more often. "We'll stop here for the night," Jon called out to Lord Davos. "Aye, we ride much longer, and we'll be riding under the moonlight, my lord," he answered back. They dismounted to begin putting up the tents and lighting a cook fire. Jon walked over to Lord Davos, slapping him on the back. He said, "Since you were so keen to rightly defend our lady's honor today, shall you put up her tent as well?" Lord Davos chuckled. "Of course, my lord," he answered. "Wouldn't want any snow falling on her." Nodding, Jon went to see where Ghost had gotten off to. Walking closer to the trees, a snowball lightly hit his legs. "I thought I said no more," he started to say. As he turned, he saw his sister sitting on a fallen tree, giggling. "I thought you were a lady," he teased her, sitting down next to her on the tree. "Well, a northern lady should be able to throw a snowball," she replied. "You're not a northern lady, Sansa. You're a northern princess," he said. "I'm not a—" she started to say. "Robb was king in the north," Jon said firmly. "That makes you a princess in the north." "Do you miss him?" she asked Jon. "Robb?" he asked. "Yes." "We'll avenge him," Sansa said. "And I'll avenge you," Jon added. They ate under the moonlight around the cook fire that night. A ring of 4 small tents were all that made up the camp, each tent with 2 men in it and 2 men on watch. Jon cursed himself for bringing so few. Sansa, being the only lady in the party, would be given her own tent. While the tents were certainly fine for 2 men, 3 could not fit in one. The only option was for Jon to share Sansa's tent. As he thought about laying next to her, he noticed an urge he had not felt since he had been north of the wall with Ygritte. "This is wrong. Sansa's my sister. I'm supposed to protect her." Still, his mind went to thoughts of the previous night, her warm body next to his, her long, stockingless legs that he had tried so hard not to notice. She had a bad dream. I was just comforting her. That's all. Gradually, the men retired to their tents. Jon decided the best course of action was to take the first watch with 2 other men. Much to his dismay, Sansa insisted on staying with him for the first watch. "She's just scared out in the open like this." As the fire went down, she started to doze against his shoulder. When Davos came to relieve him, Jon nearly had to carry her into the tent. Once inside, he helped her take her cloak off and get under the furs. When he started to crawl back out of the tent, she grabbed his arm to stop him. "Jon, please don't go," she said earnestly. "What if the Glovers sent word to the Boltons?" "Sansa, they may not help us, but they will not betray us," he said, willing himself to believe it. "I'll be right outside." "Please, Jon," she said again. He stared into her deep blue eyes, the color of the wall on a sunny day. Sighing, he told her he would be right back. Coming out of the tent, he walked toward Davos and the wildling man called Sten on watch. "The princess must be very tired," Davos observed. "She rode well today." "Yes," Jon said. "She needs to sleep more." "Aye," Davos agreed. "After what she's been through, I imagine sleep does not come easy." Jon nodded and clutched his sword hand. "If I could kill them all," he said, "for what they did to her, to our family, I would kill them 1,000,000 times over." "Well, Joffrey is dead," he said, "but you'll get your chance at Ramsay Bolton." Before Jon responded, a soft padding noise could be heard from behind them. Jon and Davos turned to see Ghost walking toward the camp. "There you are, old boy," Jon said. Ghost glanced at him and continued to walk toward Sansa's tent. "Ghost, to me," he commanded. The direwolf only ignored him while he nudged the flap open and walked into the tent. Jon heard Davos laugh. "Ha! Seems your wolf prefers the ladies' company to yours," he said. Jon turned and scowled. Don't be jealous, my lord. And truth be told, none of the men here will notice if you take a few hours to rest your eyes in the tent too," Davos added. Jon said nothing, only stared into the flames of the campfire. People will notice all kinds of things, some true, some not, when it suits them, he thought. "We all need sleep, my lord," Davos said. "You can't very well watch over the princess while you sat out here talking to me." "I find I don't sleep much since my death," he said. "But I did tell Sansa I would come back to watch over her." Jon turned away from Davos. "Good night, Lord Davos," he added. "Good night, my lord," Davos said. Approaching the tent slowly, Jon felt the longing in his body return. Sighing again, he reminded himself, "She is my half-sister, no sister. Half-sister." "Jon," he heard her whisper as he entered the tent. In the darkness, he almost stumbled over Ghost. He quickly found his way under the firs with Ghost lying between them, just like when I first laid next to Ygritte. "Are you warm enough?" he asked her. Yes," she said. "Too warm, really. I had to take off my dress and stockings." Hearing that, Jon felt his longing become stronger. He felt her hand reach over Ghost to touch his arm. "Thank you for staying with me." Without thinking, he grabbed her hand and softly kissed it. "Of course, Sansa. It's just us now. Just us and Ghost," she said with a little laugh. Jon smiled in the darkness and held her hand in his for the rest of the night.